persons have died in a road accident on National Highway number 3 linking the two major cities of Cameroon, the political capital Yaoundé and the economic capital Douala. The accident occurred yesterday or last night, and the United Nations or United States ambassador to the United Nations Security Council says that there is need for urgent action by the African Union and presidents of the Central African Regional Bloc to solve the Anglophone crisis. She says that the situation has continued deteriorating. Head of State Paul Biya demands for an extraordinary session of the upper and lower houses of Parliament in Cameroon. This is coming at the end of the November session of Parliament, and this extraordinary session in the National Assembly and the Senate has been convened for Friday, 13th December 2019. Stay with us. Four persons have died in a road accident on National Highway number 3, the national highway linking Cameroon's two main cities, the political capital Yaoundé and the economic capital Douala. It is part of what is known today as the Triangle of Death. The national highways linking Yaoundé, Douala, and of course Bafoussam, and these national highways gained the attribute, the Triangle of Death, as a result of the increasing number of deaths recorded on these highways. And the last accident last night on National Highway number 3 left 4 persons dead. Manjik and Gabriel has more.
Another dark day on the National Road number 3. 4 persons have just lost their lives as a result of an accident that occurred Tuesday night, 9 p.m. at Nkazok, situated some 6 kilometers away from the center town of Edea. We left Boya for Yaoundé when suddenly at this point a minibus stumbled off in front of us. Luckily, our driver dodged away from it and went into the bush. The minibus, reports say, was transporting wood from Yaoundé when it witnessed a flat tire and immediately went into a head-on collision with a 70-seater bus from Boya en route to Yaoundé. Early Wednesday morning, upon our arrival at the accident scene, the destruction of the minibus was enormous. Meanwhile, the 70-seater bus was right inside the bush. The 4 persons who died, their bodies are now at the Edea District Hospital mortuary, while the injured cases are also in the same health facility. The driver of the minibus has been blamed for the accident.
A 3-year-old child in Loue in the Mongo Division littoral region of the Republic of Cameroon has been burnt to death. The child is a victim of the fire incident that engulfed the building in which she was sleeping, and witness accounts say the fire incident started in the room of the child before extending to the entire building. Manjik and Gabriel once more has the details.
It was a dark Wednesday for the Wojo family in Loue, Manju subdivision, Mongo division of the littoral region. Their 3-year-old child, Kemene Divi Ocean, has just been burnt by fire.
6:30.
It was at 6:30 a.m. that it started, as the mother of the house was washing plates outside before they noticed the child in the room was already burnt.
Don't take place. People, they want to try for loss and fire. They come for skin for people.
The incident, we were told, took everyone by surprise and began from the room where little Ocean was sleeping.
We didn't have a route before we shift fire. They woke up.
We were at the roadside when we saw fire. As we arrived, we saw the flames that started from a room. Women were already in tears. We got into the house to help that it shouldn't burn the whole apartment.
Make it not take us.
Apart from the loss in life recorded, properties were also lost by Wojo family, who could not withstand the pains of losing their daughter. Security officials who descended to the incident scene have begun investigation. Meanwhile, the 3-year-old child was immediately buried. Though the real cause of the fire is not yet known, fingers are pointing at poor electrical connection.
And a news concerning the Anglophone crisis, the United States ambassador to the UN Security Council is calling for urgent action by the African Union and heads of states of the Central African Regional Bloc to solve the Anglophone crisis. And the US ambassador painted a bleak picture of the situation in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, saying that the military is not the solution to the Anglophone crisis. Innocent has more.
The Anglophone crisis featured among security issues discussed in the United Nations Security Council. It was the United States Permanent Representative to the UN Security Council, Kelly Knightcraft, who presented the armed conflict in Anglophone Cameroon. Her presentation revealed persistent gross human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings, arbitrary and unlawful detentions, as well as torture, all conducted with impunity. She says immediate humanitarian attention is required due to the worsening situation, which has led to the death of at least 3,000 people, including 300 defense and security personnel, with over 500,000 IDPs and nearly 50,000 refugees recorded. She added that belligerence to the conflict limits humanitarian access and worsening security, which has left as much as 65% of the northwest and southwest regions out of bounds to aid workers. That on November 5th, 2019, UNICEF reported that 1.9 million people, most of them children, are estimated to need assistance. Thus, an increase in 80% compared to 2018. The US calls on separatist groups and the government of Cameroon to grant humanitarian access to these areas to deliver life-saving assistance to the population in need.
We also call on all parties to respect international humanitarian law and international human rights law as applicable, as well as the protections they provide. The situation in Cameroon warrants immediate action from all parties, including the African Union and regional heads of state.
Condolences were extended to family of the local aid worker Pascal Ngwanye in Dongamantung Division, Northwest Region, abducted and killed by armed men November 30th. This implies urgent needs to end the war.
As this month is about doing and not just talking, I want to briefly list a few helpful steps that could be taken to restore a measure of stability. We urge UNOCA and our partners to take a more assertive role in resolving Cameroon's conflict and to continue to urge both the government of Cameroon and separatist group to enter into open-ended dialogue without preconditions, relinquishing their focus on a military solution.
The permanent representative also adds US supports the Swiss-led mediation process between governments and separatists, that both parties should take concrete actions to move the initiative forward such that peace returns in the two English-speaking regions.
And the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa has published a full report on the violence and atrocities committed in the crisis-hit northwest and southwest regions of the country since 2016. The center, led by Barrister Agbo Balan, ex-detainee of the Anglophone Crisis, published the report on the occasion of the International Human Rights Day. Derek Jato reports from Boya.
The Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa commemorated the 2019 edition of the Human Rights Day with the publication of a report titled Cameroon Unfolding Catastrophe, Evidence of Human Rights Violation and Crimes Against Humanity. In this book are these stories in writing: the Anglophone Crisis in 2016, the protests, violence and repression, then the militarization of the Anglophone regions, raising homes and villages in what the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa titled Unestablished Military Tactics, Forced Mass Displacement, the refugee phase of the Anglophone Crisis, internally displaced persons, and life in the bushes, arrest, torture and inhumane detention conditions, the armed separatist forces and groups, attacks against the state, schools, teachers and students. Barrister Agbo Bala, the founder of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa, said his center is investing more now on human rights awareness.
The first level of human rights violations is to know the rights. If you don't know the rights, you cannot know whether your rights have been violated. And that is not just talking. When you educate people on their rights, that is action.
And invited was Barrister Michel Ndoki. It was all about human rights violation, especially in the Anglophone regions.
I will take the example of people who are arrested in relation with the conflict. You have army people, gendarmerie policemen going into a quarter, arresting a group of people and taking them to the police. Injustice starts there, because there's a difference between those who will be able to live because they have money to pay out their freedom, and those who will not be able to live mainly because they were not able to pay.
This document has painted the picture of life and death, plus stories in between in the Anglophone regions hit by war from 2016 to present.
And there are speculations that the Anglophone crisis is the reason the President of the Republic of Cameroon, Paul Biya, has requested for an extraordinary session of the lower and upper houses of Parliament, and an extraordinary session of Parliament convened by House Speaker Kavayeke Jibril for Friday, 13th December 2019 will take place as from 1 p.m. and this is contained in a release signed by House Speaker Kavayeke Jibril, and in the same vein another release signed by the Senate Vice President. An extraordinary session of the upper house of Parliament has been convened for Friday. The release is signed by Abubakar Abdullahi, and the extraordinary session has been convened on the request, as I indicated earlier, of the President of the Republic, Paul Biya. The November session ended today with the adoption of the 2020 state budget of Cameroon, and it stands at 4,951.7 billion francs CFA. The controversial bill on the use of the English and French languages in courts across the country was also adopted during the November session of Parliament. Another bill adopted is the one on the tribalism. It should be recalled that concerning the bill on the promotion of bilingualism in courts across the country, lawyers went on strike in Bamenda in the northwest region of the country, protesting against that bill, which they saw as another threat to the common law system, the common law culture. And of course they were saying that that bill should not be adopted by the members of Parliament. It has been adopted without any amendment this far, and of course implementation is expected in the months ahead in courts across the country. Now we're talking about security issues. Some top officials of the forces of law and order, notably the Gendarmerie and the National Police Corps, were meeting here in the economic capital Douala in a capacity building workshop with regards to their role in protecting or preventing violence, and of course ensuring that the upcoming municipal and legislative elections billed for February 9, 2020 take place hitch-free, notably in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, the two regions hit by socio-political and security crisis for close to 3 years. Today we have greater details on this in the following extract of first the Littoral Governor Samuel Dieudonné Vahadibois, Emini Zephyrin, who is the Deputy Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program, and Bila Bois Mathieu, Election Advisor, United Nations Development Program. Take a listen.
Hold these elections without taking some measures. So the forces have been then involved to this process to know how they can accompany this process, how they can survey, and then how they can bring peace amongst the populations. We cannot have an electoral process without taking those measures. That's why this program is to make a kind of training of these forces to be able to tackle all the difficulties we can have.
The country is going to hold an important electoral process in 2020. So we have already trained the trainers of the electoral process for the security forces and defense to accompany all the actors, notably the security forces, to be capacitated to support all the process, all the electoral process which is coming, and to be able to create an enabling environment for peaceful elections in our country.
After exchange of experience from region, as we are aware, Northwest was concerned, Southwest, Littoral was concerned, as well West. So during the 3 days, they exchanged their experience, and I think that, as they said, they are well capacitated to move forward in securing the electoral process and the upcoming election on 9 February 2020.
Coming up, for me, Armstrong Sander takes a look at some curiosities in the list of candidates for the municipal and legislative elections published by the elections organizing body Elections Cameroon. His report.
The curiosity of names of candidates published by Elections Cameroon to run for the 2020 municipal and legislative elections in Cameroon is the presence of Issa Chiroma Bakari, current Minister of Employment and Vocational Training in Cameroon. The president and founder of the National Salvation Front Party wants to be member of parliament for Benue West in the North region under the banner of his NSF political party. Issa Chiroma Bakari, if voted as member of parliament on the 9th of February 2020, will have to choose between being an MP and his current position as minister. Another name speaking is Jean Joga, presidential candidate in 2011, today candidate for Vurisad for his FUC political party. In 2011, he was noted for the use of French language, which was highly criticized. In the Donga Mantung Center constituency in the northwest region of Cameroon with 2 parliamentary seats, the ruling CPG and party list headed by TAMFU Mingala Gerard stands on challenge. Cameroon's veteran musician Coty Francois is going in as member of parliament for the Mungo South constituency. Paul-Henri Kingi, president of the New Cameroon Patriotic Movement, will be fighting with Nkoti Francois over the lone legislative seat in Mongo South of the Littoral region. Cabral Libi is running under the banner of his Cameroon Party for National Reconciliation in the Nyong-Ankele Division, Central Region of Cameroon, where the incumbent UPC list was rejected by Elections Cameroon. Serge Espoir Matomba is gunning for the Vuri West parliamentary seat, where he hopes to nurse and nurture his Pu's political party. Another political party president gunning in for a curiously tense constituency is Jean-Jacques Ikindi of the Progressist Movement political party in the Vuri Center. He will be fighting with Osi Joshua of the Social Democratic Front, Sam Baka of the CDU, Abe Elimbilobe of the MEC political party, and candidates of the ruling Cameroon People's Democratic Movement political party.
The United Nations Refugee Agency is stepping up sensitization on its assignments, notably with regards to refugees, internally displaced persons, and other groups of persons who are in situations that are not normal with regards to the fact that they have been either kicked out of their homes or their countries for one reason or the other, generally wars and a crisis, because of wars and crisis. And the organization was today at the government high school, government bilingual, government high school Aqua, here in Douala, to sensitize some students on the importance of welcoming refugees, the importance of behaving properly towards refugees and helping them to survive. It should be noted that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees in Cameroon, many of them coming from the Central African Republic, and many of them are living in the east region of the country. Some of them are, of course, here in the Douala. And the organization, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, was accompanied by some non-governmental organizations, including Plan Cameroon and Horizon Femme. And some of these organizations were also sensitizing the students on other issues, notably hygiene, or better still menstruation, and hygienic rules to be respected by girls and women during that period of menstruation. And we are receiving one of the officials of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Henry Daniel Ewane. You are the Assistant Field Officer of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees here in Douala. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Why are you stepping up sensitization on your activities? Was there a problem?
The purpose of these sensitization activities was to expand information to various stakeholders, to various people. And we know that when we face crisis, women and children are often the most affected people. So we are used to sensitize adults, we are used to sensitize administration and organizations, but we think that it's also very important to sensitize children, and especially children at school, because sometimes they are studying with refugees, they are studying with other persons of concern to UNHCR, and they don't know how to behave when they are with those persons.
And you're talking about situations of conflict like what is happening in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. There are many women and children who are affected. Many of them have been displaced. Some of them are here in the littoral region. Some of them are in other parts of the country. Were there some of them in the school where you were today, Government High School Aqua? Are there some of them there?
I cannot confirm that, but we know that there are many IDPs in the Douala town, and probably there were some IDPs in the Government High School Aqua. But here in Douala, we essentially work with refugees. We have two field offices in Boya, one in Boya and one in Bamenda, who are now working with IDPs. Actually, presently we are not yet involved in the assistance of IDPs in Douala. So our target today were all those Cameroonians and all those refugees who are studying in government high school Aqua.
How many refugees do we have in that school? How many of them do we have in Douala, in Cameroon?
In that school, we have now about 25 students in Aqua Government High School. But in Douala, we have our last figures were 15,000 refugees and asylum seekers. So among our population, we have 9,000 refugees and something like 5,000 asylum seekers who are still on the process of their refugee status determination.
From what I heard during the different articulations of the events you had today at Government High School Aqua, some of the refugees are coming from the Central African Republic, some from Mali, some from Senegal.
Yes, we have refugees coming from more than 20 countries of origins, but they are mostly Central Africa citizens or Central African refugees.
All right. What are the conditions in which they are studying in the school? Are they stigmatized? Are they well received by their peers and so on?
Fortunately, in Aqua Government High School, there was not. We were not alerted by stigmatization or discrimination, but we think that it's always necessary to explain to all the population that refugees are people like you and me. So they are living, they are working, they are studying the same conditions and the same situation with their friends who are Cameroonians. So the purpose of our activity today was only to reassure those refugees that we are here to educate people, we are here to inform people about their rights, but we are also here to educate refugees and the other persons of concern to UNHCR to live in peace, to live in the better situation, in the better conditions with their neighbors, with the hosting population, which is Cameroonians.
Right. What are some of the major difficulties that the refugees generally face in Cameroon and other parts of the continent?
First of all, we have to thank our government, the Cameroon Republic, because refugees have free access to the country. When they are fleeing war, when they are fleeing any kind of crisis from their country, they succeed in coming in Cameroon and to benefit from the peace that we have in the hospitality that we have here in Cameroon. But we have noticed that so many people still don't know who are the refugees, what are the rights of the refugees, and sometimes they even don't know that refugees have also duties. So our role is to accompany the government in all the efforts that are made to enable refugees to benefit from protection and to be assisted. We are here to support what the Cameroon is always doing with those refugees. Refugees are here in Cameroon because Cameroon is a land of hospitality, and we need to accompany everybody so that this hospitality keep for a long time.
The hospitality continues.
Exactly.
All right. Henry Daniel Iwane, Assistant Field Officer, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. You are welcome.
Coming up, Hermin Iluga takes a look at challenges faced by sickle cell patients and medical prescriptions that can help them improve on their health situations.
Your pains are recurrent. Sickle cell patients have constantly suffered from repeated crises which systematically others survive and cope with. Meanwhile, another folk hardly survives.
There is a cure for sickle cell disease, and the cure is to do a hematopoietic stem cell transplant.
That is not done in Cameroon, but it is done in other countries like in India, it's done in the US, and it's done in the West generally. So what they do is they get stem cells from somebody who doesn't have sickle cell, and they transplant it to the children so that the stem cells can now produce normal cells who do not have that sickling ability. And so the children now have they're completely cured from sickle cell.
Till date, scientists have done lots of research to relieve sickle cell patients at 100%, as well as families to no avail. And for researchers, it's much more preferable educating and sensitizing the public on how to avoid having sickle cell children, a situation which has always left the kids face trauma throughout their lifespan.
This trauma occurs when they have the crisis. The crisis is very painful. One of the things that cause this trauma is particularly when the child is being diagnosed. The first time the child is being diagnosed, the parents feel that trauma because when they tell you your child is sickle cell anemic, there is this myth that people have that sickle cell anemic children is equal to death. So when you are first diagnosed, they feel this trauma that comes. Secondly, the crisis. When they have the crisis, it's so painful. The crisis is so painful, so much so that the children feel they can die. And this unprocessed memory remain within the brain.
That's already a first point that I'm giving to those kids, which I know one day they will have a cure. Because I know all those kids, they have free care in polyclinic Bonanjo. So there is no way that the hope that they will have a cure will be there one day.
To avoid this, then the need for premarital counseling.
You will have sometimes some parents who even come to the hospital. You say that this is what's wrong with the children, and somebody will come from outside and say
premarital counseling. What we do with premarital counseling is that we counsel these parents to do their electrophoresis tests to make sure that they are not carriers of the gene, and by so doing they don't get married. Two carriers don't get married to each other to bring forth sickle cell children. In other light, which we mean it can be eradicated. This disease can be eradicated with premarital counseling. It can be eradicated.
While targeting a broad sector of the population on sickle cell and ways out, health actors remain positive on the stem cell transplants, which could bring much more relief to the patients and families.
Talking Point is up next. Thanks for staying with us in Talking Points. We are receiving a legal mind, member of the Cameroon and Nigerian Bar Associations, Barrister TAMFU Richard. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Babila. The pleasure is all mine.
The President of the Republic demands for an extraordinary session of the lower and upper houses of Parliament, session that has been convened for Friday, 13th December 2019. What do we read within the lines of this extraordinary session requested by the President of the Republic?
You agree with me that the political atmosphere of Cameroon has been so busy this past week, where we are preparing elections in the forthcoming days. And as if you also look at the international level, you see that there's mounting pressure with respect to United Nations communication. So what I can preview maybe is that the head of states wants to maybe pound out much on the resolutions that were obtained at the major national dialogue. That's talking specifically maybe to the special status of the Anglophones regions. Or it could also be maybe another way maybe to carry forward the elections, which is being highly contested by some political leaders. Or we may think that the head of state maybe is calling maybe those two houses maybe to see which provision of the constitution it can revise. So those are the possible options with respect to the political atmosphere that I am observing in Cameroon at now.
And there have been high expectations with regards to the special status recommendation of the major national dialogue, its implementation, which Barrister Agbobala, for example, already indicated as soon as the major national dialogue ended, that the special status cannot be implemented without an amendment of the Constitution. So there are indications that this could probably be the major issue on the table in the extraordinary session of Parliament.
Possibly. We can only wait to see exactly, because when we even talk about the special status, to me, I don't even know the content of it. So I don't know what it's all about. So I just expect to. I'm also waiting, like other Cameroonians, to see what will be decided or discussed on that 13th December.
Cardinal Tome, in one of his last statements, said that the people of the Northwest and Southwest regions are expecting the content and the implementation of that special status, and the SDF had already started giving some indications that the best option would be the example of Quebec in Canada. Quebec, which is a nation in a nation called Canada, with its own system in place, with its own assembly, House of Chiefs, and many other institutions that are put in place within the framework of the special status. Now, another thing that happened during the November, the extraordinary session of Parliament came at the end of the November session of Parliament, and during that session, a controversial bill was adopted by the parliamentarians, a bill that sent lawyers on strike, common law lawyers in the Northwest region of the country. The bill on the promotion of bilingualism in the courts, the use of English and the French languages in courts across the country. And the lawyers saw this bill as a threat or another threat to the common law system. And the bill has been adopted without any amendment.
Sincerely speaking, that bill will create another more confusion, because I tried to imagine a scenario where you are in court. Let me take specifically maybe a common law court with a French-speaking magistrate, and you have two lawyers, or the plaintiffs, or the plaintiffs, and maybe the defendant, who are maybe English-speaking. So I imagine the type of communications they are going to have and the type of ruling that is going to be delivered. So to me, I think that bill really, to me, will create more confusions than envisaged. And when I look at it critically, I see some type of funny thing in it, because you see the English and French language is being predominantly being spoken in Northwest and Southwest, over other 8 regions where you speak French. So imagine that you see, if, for example, Anglophones, maybe magistrates are being transferred into those French regions, they will have no impact. I think it will be much felt in the English-speaking regions, because you have no choice than to express yourself in English. And with respect to when it comes to law, there are some legal terminologies that it will be very, very difficult for you to translate, or even the French magistrate who is sitting there, you can't just in a rush try to harmonize 2 different systems of law, because the civil law is completely different from the common law system. So trying to promote these 2 languages, I think, to me, some special consideration ought to have been made with respect maybe to the judiciary or the judicial system.
Because the law allows or permits magistrates to use either the French or the English languages.
That is what the bill is saying.
English in the Francophone parts of the country and the Anglophone parts of the country. That simply means that if a Francophone magistrate finds himself in a court in Bamenda, he can render judgment in French.
Exactly, that's what the bill is saying.
And your colleague, the representative of the Barr Council president in Bamenda, said this is injustice. This is going to have a negative impact on justice and the entire common law system.
He was very correct, because like I'm saying, imagine you a litigant who is maybe English speaking. Your communication with the French magistrate, it can't flow. Even the submissions that the lawyers will be, because in the English parts we go by way of affidavits. I don't know how how do the French magistrate is going to either translate those affidavits, or I can't really picture out the scenario, but it would be very confusing. So I think to me it wasn't proper for that bill to go in. The government ought to have maybe reconsidered its position with respect to that bill, because it's going to cause more confusion.
And it should also be made clear that according to that law, the Anglophone magistrate who finds himself in the Francophone part of the country, in Yaoundé, in Douala, for example, in one of the courts there, is permitted to deliver judgment in the English language.
That's what the bill is saying.
And this, despite the protests of the lawyers, the common law lawyers, who even went on strike in Bamenda, the law has simply gone through.
That's why I say we have a deft government that doesn't listen. It does as it thinks, and it thinks that since it has the majority in parliament, it can force whatever they want to force through the parliament to feed the population. I think if you look critically, that was the starting point of the Anglophone crisis, when they tried
2016.
Exactly.
Late 2016.
Exactly, when they tried to transfer some French-speaking magistrates in Bamenda, and lawyers had to rise, and immediately the Attorney General who was in Bamenda was transferred to the north. You see, that was a peak of the Anglophone crisis. So if today it has been passed as a bill, I am afraid that the days ahead, I don't think that the credibility that our judiciary is having at this time will even still hold, because I can't understand how communications will be flowing. How these are two different systems of law. You need to be a lawyer maybe to understand exactly what I'm saying. You can't just decide to merge a civil law system with a common law system and you think it can hold. We have seen loopholes in trying maybe to harmonize the criminal procedure code. We have seen loopholes in trying to harmonize laws on business laws. You see, it will be very difficult, Mr. Babili, I tell you.
Some critics have interpreted this law as another phase or another side of the assimilation.
Exactly, that's pure assimilation, because, like I was saying, we have 10 regions. 8 are predominantly in French, with the small 2 regions which I consider to be the minority. So if you decide to harmonize these 2 regions, immediately you are automatically assimilating the Anglophones too, so that they should pick up, because I know that French will be predominant. I don't see how you will be able to maybe have English-speaking magistrates into those regions compared to the proportion that you have, compared to the proportion of French-speaking magistrates that you have in these 2 regions. So you see that in a nutshell, or in the days to come, I don't think you will even see about common law. It will be wiped off. Predominantly French will be applicable into those regions, and then judgments will be rendered in French. That's a form of assimilation.
All right, Barrister, before we go, the United States ambassador to the UN Security Council says that there is need for urgent action by the African Union and heads of states of the Central African Regional Bloc. She said this after painting a bleak picture of the situation in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. What are some of those urgent actions that the AU and heads of state of the CEMAC zone can take to solve the Anglophone crisis?
Well, because that's what they have been saying. I think they're just maybe implementing sanctions. I think that's the best thing to do now, because Cameroon has been very, very reluctant in listening to all the recommendations proposed by those organizations. I think the UN or those bodies should pass in sanctioning Cameroon, maybe.
Sanctions?
Yes, exactly.
Barrister TAMFU Richard, member of the Cameroon and Nigerian Bar Associations, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Babila.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us.